Kedves szervezők, hölgyeim és uraim!
It is a great honor for me to have this opportunity to speak to you here. We have heard numerous brilliant speeches here, and very many clear-minded ideas have been put forward here. I think I can't add very much to this, but I feel already relieved because we see that this conference is really fulfilling its task. The need for nations, why Europe needs sovereign nation states. First, a little about Finnish expectations when joining the EU in 1995. The Association of Finnish Culture and Identity, which I'm here representing, is a traditional Finnish cultural organization founded in 1906. The purpose of our organization is to strengthen a positive sense of national identity, patriotism, to safeguard Finnish language and Finnish-speaking culture, and to promote a democratic way of thinking and sovereignty. When Finland began discussing the possibility of joining the EU, the patriotic spirit of the previous generations still lived strong. We were confident that joining the EU would not threaten our nation, language or culture, since in the 19th European cooperation was understood in terms of internationalism as cooperation between sovereign nations and not in terms of transnationalism. Here is a quote: "A backwards country we are not, and an isolated country we don't want to become, so let us be Europeans," declared the editorial of a prominent Finnish periodical in the year 1994. This feeling was echoed by the Finnish intelligentsia and political elite, most of whom were clearly suffering from so-called oikophobia, fear of your own roots, and couldn't think critically about the EU. They were blinded by the promise of Finland becoming part of Europe, and that soon we wouldn't have to travel abroad to go to Europe because Helsinki would be in Europe. And actually some high-level Finnish politicians put the aim as to become an element in the nuclear of EU. National traditions and culture in the shadow of EU. Now it seems that we should have listened more carefully to what was being said by the European leaders of that era. Already in 1996, Chancellor Helmut Kohl of Germany insisted that the nation state cannot solve the great problems of the 21st century, and that the disintegration of European nation states into one large political union is a question of war and peace. In stating that the era of nation states is over, Kohl was echoing what prominent social and political scientists of his day were also saying. For example, Jürgen Habermas provided a systematic critique of tradition that questioned the relevance of past values. He promoted social and cultural identities that stood in opposition to national sentiments and traditions. His main idea was that people should be detached from their national communities. Habermas' post-national identity is post-historical and post-traditional. It is not defined by the past and it is freed from traditions. Habermas also thinks that the European peoples can no longer be conceived as culturally homogeneous and regards concepts like the people or the nation as a dangerous fantasy undermining diversity. As Frank Furedi has aptly pointed out, this means transforming diversity from a descriptive term into a moral value that attributes superiority of heterogeneity over homogeneity. Ulrich Beck and other prominent German social scientists spoke of a transnational Weltanschauung, according to which politics had to be deterritorialized and identities denationalized, because national politics had become ineffective in a globalized world and because nation states violated the new principle of diversity. It denied diversity by dividing basic rights by nation. Here, one must remember, however, that cultural diversity as a core European value was until recently understood as the diversity of national cultures. The EU elites and post-nationalist commentators saw nation-states nationalism traditions based on historical continuities and the legitimacy of identities built around national cultures as something unequivocally bad, since they held all these things as responsible for Europe's past destructive violence. Even though, as Hannah Arendt has pointed out, totalitarianism witnessed during World War II was a violation of and a break from Western history and tradition, not part of it. Instead of reaffirming tradition, upholding internationalism, supporting nation states and the diversity of national cultures, the EU has embraced transnational cosmopolitanism and identity politics, where there is no legitimate place for nation states, national cultures, or national identities. But as the COVID-19 pandemic showed, when times get tough, the thing we rely on is the nation state. Some thoughts as a conclusion: restoring the idea of nations. Thus, what is needed is to relearn the relevance of the values of the past for contemporary times and to promote national sentiments and traditions. The EU must recognize national cultures and sovereign nation states as Europe's backbone and let go of its transnational idealism. The strength of Europe lies in the difference of its member states, not in the forced similarity. Our important contribution to the rehabilitation of the nation was to translate and publish Sir Roger Scruton's most important book, The Need for Nations, in Finnish last year, titled Kansakuntaa tarvitaan. Scruton's book reminds us of what we have forgotten and eloquently defends nation states explains where the advocates of supranational organizations or transnationalism go wrong. Why patriotism, as Cruton understands it, is a positive thing, and why national loyalties are needed for democracy to work. According to Cruton, the case against the nation state has not been properly made, and the case for the transnational alternative has not been made at all. And that we must take back our inheritance to reassume it. As Robert Hawthorne summarized Scruton's idea, a viable democracy requires a community to which most people feel they belong to and to which they owe their loyalty. They must feel part of a collective we. They must be linked by ties of reciprocal obligation that ensure they help each other in time of need, that motivate them to participate in political life and respect the outcome of the democratic process when they lose. They must also feel that important decisions affecting the community are under their collective control. If these conditions are not satisfied, democracy will atrophy. Respect for law will decay, and the society may even break up into warring fractions. I would like to end my presentation with some of Mark Dooley's words from this year's issue of European Conservative, where he writes that we must persuade people that the ideas matter and that they matter most when used to defend the values that define us. Hegel knew that unless we assimilate and engage with the cultural, spiritual, political, and philosophical heritage that is ours, we shall remain strangers to ourselves. The fact that so many have now disengaged from that heritage, opting instead for a rootless life among the shadows, is no reason for apathy or despair. For it is only when we give people a reason to come home that they will finally see why living as a stranger is no life at all. Thank you.